The waves crashed against the Roman legions like an army of ghosts. Iron met salt water. Swords flashed, not against men, but against the sea itself. Thousands of disciplined soldiers stood at attention, awaiting an order that defied all logic. Then came the voice, sharp, divine, and utterly mad. "Strike the waves," commanded Emperor Caligula. "Attack Neptune, the god who dares defy Rome." And in that instant, history witnessed one of the strangest wars ever declared. A war not of nations, but of delusion. This is the story of how one emperor, drunk on power and haunted by paranoia, declared war on the ocean and collected seashells as spoils of victory. The year was AD 39, and the Roman Empire was at the height of its glory, a colossus stretching from the sands of Africa to the forests of Germania. Yet within the marble palaces of Rome, beneath golden ceilings and divine statues, madness was brewing. The emperor, Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, known to history as Caligula, had begun his rule as a promise of renewal. The people had cheered him as the son of beloved Germanicus, a savior after the dark tyranny of Tiberius. But within just a few short years, the promise turned to fear, and fear turned to nightmare. Caligula was not always insane. In his youth, he was charming, intelligent, and politically shrewd. His name, Caligula, meant little boots, a nickname he earned as a child, playing among the soldiers of his father's legions. He grew up surrounded by power, adored by troops, admired by the people. But tragedy shadowed him. His father was poisoned. His mother and brothers were executed. He lived for years under the suspicious eye of Tiberius, an emperor notorious for cruelty and paranoia. By the time Caligula finally became emperor in AD 37, the trauma had already carved deep wounds in his mind. At first, Rome rejoiced. Caligula freed political prisoners, restored banished families, and gave lavish games to the people. The Senate praised him, calling him the new Augustus. The empire felt alive again. But then, something changed. Some say it was an illness, a fever that struck him down just months into his reign. Others say it was the crushing weight of absolute power. Whatever the cause, when Caligula recovered, something inside him had broken. He began to see himself not as man, but as God. The line between mortal and divine blurred in his mind. He spoke of Neptune, Jupiter, and Apollo, not as deities to be worshipped, but as rivals to be challenged. He demanded temples built in his honor. Statues of gods were ordered to bear his face. He told the people that Rome had been ruled by men for too long. Now it was time for the gods to reign. And in Caligula's mind, he was the god Rome had been waiting for. Then came the sea. Rome's campaigns across Europe had expanded its borders to the edge of the known world. Caligula's generals wanted to continue their conquests, to march into Britannia, the mysterious island across the channel. The emperor agreed. He led his legions north, traveling through Gaul, reaching the shores of the English Channel. The soldiers were ready, their armor polished, their standards raised high. The wind howled over the cliffs of the northern coast. Before them lay the sea, cold, endless, untamed. But instead of commanding an invasion, Caligula did something no Roman emperor had ever done. He turned his fury not toward the Britons, but toward the ocean itself. Standing on the shore, he gazed at the waves and proclaimed that the god Neptune had insulted him. The god of the sea, master of storms and tides, had dared to resist his will. Caligula, now seeing himself as a living deity, could not tolerate such defiance. "The sea will bow to Rome," he shouted. "Neptune shall pay tribute to his emperor." And with that, he declared war on the sea. The soldiers watched in disbelief as Caligula ordered them to line up in battle formation facing the waves. Horns blared. Standards were lifted. Drums thundered. The order came. Attack! The legions charged forward, into the surf, into the foam, swinging their swords and spears against the water. Shields clashed against waves, arrows vanished into spray. The might of Rome, trained, disciplined, relentless, fought an invisible enemy. To the Romans, Neptune was real. To Caligula, this was no act of madness. It was divine warfare. When the battle was over, Caligula announced victory. Neptune had been defeated. The emperor ordered his soldiers to collect the spoils of war, seashells, and store them in chests as trophies of their conquest. These, he declared, were the treasures of the ocean, sacred proof that Rome had triumphed over the god of the sea. He even commanded his generals to send reports to the Senate in Rome, describing the glorious victory. And to immortalize his triumph, he built a tower of trophies near the shore, a monument to his conquest of Neptune. To modern minds, it seems like madness. But in the world of Caligula, there was meaning. Twisted, symbolic, but meaning nonetheless. Some historians believe the event was a form of satire, a calculated act to humiliate his troops or mock the Senate. Others think it was performance, divine theater meant to display his godlike authority. But to those who served under him, it was simply terrifying. The soldiers obeyed, for to disobey Caligula was to die. What made it worse was that Caligula's madness didn't end at the shore. On returning to Rome, he paraded the captured seashells as if they were the riches of a conquered land. He called them the spoils of Neptune. He even distributed a few among the people, saying that Rome was now the master of both land and sea. Behind the laughter and whispers of the Senate, no one dared question him, because everyone knew Caligula had killed for less. By this time, the emperor's reign had descended into terror. He executed senators for minor slights. He turned his palace into a temple where he sat between statues of gods, demanding sacrifices in his name. He slept with the wives of senators to humiliate them. He appointed his favorite horse, Incitatus, as a consul, feeding it golden oats, dressing it in jewels, and building it a marble stable. He demanded the people worship him as a living deity, the new Jupiter. The war on the sea became a symbol of his insanity, a public performance of divine delusion that shook the empire's faith in leadership. Rome, a civilization built on order and discipline, was now ruled by chaos personified. Yet beneath the madness, there was a strange kind of genius. Caligula understood the power of spectacle. He knew that fear and awe were the tools of emperors. His war on Neptune may have been madness, but it was also propaganda. It reminded Rome that no force, human or divine, could challenge the will of its emperor. But power built on fear never lasts. By AD 41, just 2 years after his victory over the sea, Caligula's tyranny reached its breaking point. The Senate conspired against him. His own guards, once loyal, turned their swords on him. He was assassinated in a corridor of his palace, stabbed over 30 times. His blood stained the marble floors of the same empire he believed he ruled as a god. And so ended the life of Rome's most infamous mad emperor, the man who dared to fight the sea. But his legacy lived on. His name became a symbol of unchecked power, divine arrogance, and the madness that follows absolute rule. Even centuries later, historians and philosophers would ask, was Caligula truly insane, or was his madness the mirror of Rome itself, a reflection of an empire drunk on power? Because in truth, Caligula's war on Neptune was not just an act of lunacy, it was a prophecy. The Roman Empire, like Caligula, would one day believe itself invincible, only to be undone by forces it could not control. The waves that Caligula struck in fury would, in time, return to wash away the empire he once ruled. The sea always wins. But before we end, let's imagine that moment once more. The shoreline, the soldiers, the emperor. The sun setting over the horizon. The sound of waves crashing, mixing with the clash of Roman shields. An emperor standing tall, arms raised, declaring victory over the eternal sea. It's a haunting image, beautiful, absurd, tragic. The ocean remains unchanged, but Rome's greatest empire trembled beneath one man's delusion. In the end, the seashells, those tiny spoils of war, became the perfect symbol of Caligula's reign. Fragile, hollow, and easily broken. If you enjoyed this dive into one of Rome's strangest moments, make sure to subscribe for more stories of history's forgotten madness. Comment below. Would you have obeyed Caligula's order to attack the sea? Let's see how many of you would have dared to face Neptune himself. Because in history, sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones that truly happened.